I think I might now start. Yeah. So let's come to the safety first, the ground rules. So we will be here for 3 hours. The main session of the workshop is being recorded. The breakout rooms will not be recorded. The recording will be available to view for a limited time after the event. Please take responsibility for your personal contribution to look after yourself. Be kind and respect self and the others. There would be a comfort break at an opportune moment. Keep yourself grounded, stretch, do whatever it takes to make yourself comfortable. And above everything, enjoy your experience. And just to let you know, it's my first time too. So very exciting, but at the same time, nerve-wracking. So just let's breathe and on we go. There might be times if you felt my speed was too fast, please let me know or write in the chat function, and Rebecca, my buddy or my workshop attendant, will relay it to me. Any questions so far? In terms of Zoom, if I may request you to kindly mute yourself when quiet because of backdrop noise, but please unmute yourself to chip in where you felt it was appropriate. And of course, use the chat function or raise your hands to stay on board. So the topic of the workshop today is the cultural other in transactional analysis. Before I explore this topic any further, let me start by giving you my cultural hello. So who am I? Well, as I mentioned, I am Divya Sharma. I'm a British Asian who arrived to UK in October 2005 with a 6-month-old baby, a 4-year-old preschooler, 2 suitcases, and a pushchair to join my husband, who moved 6 months prior to me as a junior doctor. He took us to our rented home called Cozy Nest in Romsey, and that's where my story begins. That very weekend, the clocks changed, and here I was in the cold, dark England, miles away, leaving behind my family in India in the warm sunshine. Monday morning set a new reality, which, with not seeing husband until quite late in the evenings, I donned the role of a wife, mother, and a homemaker, like most of the other moms in any part of the world. And that was my identity. It reminded me of my own mom, who would have been in similar position after marriage, 2 pregnancies, and then childbirths amidst the transitions to fully settle and join my dad, who in this industrial town of Copper was establishing his roots as a young graduate mining engineer, and I was a preschooler in the 1970s. On the way to my son's preschool, there was a newsagent shop, and I would buy the Romsey Advertiser, the weekly one, for 40p then. There's no WhatsApp at that time, and although I could call my family in India on Skype or phone, everything was too dynamic. And being raised with a mutual belief that no news is good news, it was a great permission to start and look forward to the new chapter, which was exciting and a little adventure. Romsey reminded me of my town Copper, where I did my entire schooling. Green, clean, set amidst the foothills of Aravallis, very modern, safe, and people would say hello to each other. And I started to do the same. Some would stop to admire my children or just discuss the weather. With each passing day, I became familiar with the place and started to settle. I even learned that the last Viceroy of India, Lord Mountbatten, lived here. And I thought, wow, that's some connection. And I'm bemused. I learned about local libraries to be able to borrow books and toys for my children. That led to me offering myself as a volunteer with my baby at local toy library once a fortnight. I learned about toddler groups, mums groups, and in time was learning more through community while starting to develop my own contacts. In the process of settling, adapting, and integrating within the community, I played various volunteer roles in varying settings whilst raising my young family. I found community-funded adult courses like parenting, computers, etc., while learning each day. I enjoyed working with people from all diverse backgrounds and learned about activities in the area, got familiar with the mannerisms, and in time started to grow around the town. I felt acknowledged, accepted, and validated. They say it takes a village to raise a child, and it was definitely the case for my two, where mums would ask me to put the children's name down for beavers, guides, and all these clubs. And before I knew it, my kids were a part of them. In terms of career, I did not wish to go back to teaching English, especially as people would casually remark that I had picked up English quickly, plus learning from some of friends who were in teaching about the work culture in teaching. I also wanted something new, which I'd always longed for, like counseling, as I had psychology at a graduation level in India. My conversations grew beyond rituals, pastimes, and exchanges started to flow with people around me. I realized how accepting people were to all accents, some more than the others. We slowed down. I learned to be patient, did not finish the sentences, or just paraphrased to check if we were able to understand each other. I found in time there was so much to learn and give, and the outward differences, the conscious and unconscious biases started to dispel or get less as more similarities started to emerge. I started to connect to friends, and it was the way as in my past. We made a little extended family of moms who, although looked different, but thought in the same way. And sometimes we jokingly would call it our United Nations. I felt great that I was not being judged by any lens, and my identity and our family's identity was being defined within community, and I belonged in the same way as did others. There were some things which were different, which is a part of every expat experience who comes from different diasporas and the hoops they have to go through. But on a personal level, it felt home. I started with counseling basics course way back in 2007, but as an overseas candidate had to pay 3 times the fees. I waited for a couple of years, and when I was at par with the rest, in fits and starts, kept going to the various levels of counseling, balancing other hats in my own time, at my own pace. Now I'm at level 7 as trainee on my advanced psychotherapy training at the Burn Institute. I work as a volunteer at a GP surgery where I started as a trainee counselor, which gives me a varied client experience and great supervision. I have volunteered in some specialist agencies like University of Southampton, the Rape Crisis Center, and GAM Care. I have a small private practice, and it feels good to be here, emerging in my own identity of self as Divya with baby steps, learning each day, belonging here, and playing a small part in this huge, diverse TA community where UK is home, just 4.5 hours time difference away from India back home. So that's me and my cultural hello. So over to you next. I would like to invite you to give me your cultural hello. How was this experience for you? Anything which you might like to add before we go into breakout rooms? Okay, so in that case, let's start with by getting in the smaller groups. Rebecca, shall we say groups of 3? And then give your cultural hello to each other. Who are you? Where do you belong? And where is home? Welcome back. So how was that experience? Would anybody like to say on behalf of their group?
I think what I found interesting is we were all minded that we had a job to do. We had an exercise to do.
Yeah.
And actually, before we realised, we were doing it anyway. Just after we said hello,
Yeah.
we just started. For me, I started drawing Venn diagrams in my head of the parts of our cultures that overlapped, the things that we had in common,
Sure.
the things that we could identify and relate to.
Yeah. And that's so natural, isn't it? That's what happens. Yeah. Anybody else would like to share? Thanks, David, for that. Okay. Okay. If I may ask, what made you choose this workshop? What interested you, and what would you like to gain from this workshop, please? If maybe a few of you would like to share that, like, your personal intention and purpose, basically.
Yeah, I'd like to say something. I think the word that really stands out for me is the culture bit. I think I'm very culturally rich from where I come from. I've shared within my group that I am originally born and raised in Africa. So Africa is full of culture.
Of course.
And then my heritage has a lot of culture as well. And so I wanted to see how you are going to incorporate culture in transsectional analysis, because I would like to be able to work with multicultural communities as well in the future and try and see what bit you bring into this.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. And, with all your richness, is it Anandi?
Yeah.
Yeah, how much we can all bring, all those experiences which are in this room, the session, and let's see what emerges. Yeah, no, thank you very much. Anybody else?
Sarah, were you going to say something? Yeah. Oh, we can't hear you, Sarah.
Sound is crap.
We heard that.
Oh, sorry.
Okay, I'll shout if you like, because it was really playing up in the group. It varies. Now, I'm kind of the opposite in that I realised I came from a small town without that much cultural influence, and I've now got 4 or 5 clients who have got different ethnic backgrounds.
Sure.
And, so I'm doing lots and lots of reading because the cultural part is really coming into the room. And so don't feel accepted by the British culture, and they're really struggling, and it is part of their don't belong injunctions and things. So I really was drawn to a workshop on culture because it's something I really need to know about.
Yeah, absolutely. So well said, because we all we're feeling the same, isn't it? Like, yeah. And for me, exactly, all these reasons and personal reasons. And I thought, for me, why did I choose to do it? And, it was, again, to do a space, reconstruct a space together. So I would be using the space co-creatively to reconstruct self together, to generate awareness, sensitivity, and to explore the concept of the cultural other. Rebecca, if you didn't mind sharing that slide, please, for me.
We're already on the.
No, the one, the contracting bit. Slide number 4, please. Thank you. Because that sort of ties with my title, the subtopic, which was just after the exercise.
Yeah, that is the one after the exercise. So this is the next one, the aims.
No, before the aims, please.
So this is the exercise, and then you've got this.
Yeah, and then after the exercise, number 4, please.
Is it this that you're after?
I think your share might be stuck. It doesn't seem to be changing slides at all.
Hang on a second, let me re-share. Sorry, I thought I'm skipping through things and I'm.
Yeah, sorry, it might be easier. Shall I do it, Rebecca, if that's.
Yeah, if you want to share, let me see if I can.
If you click on the screen.
Is it this one you wanted to be in?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, basically just wanted to say that it was a co-created space. So it's like, all the experiences you bring in and for mine. And, the idea which I've developed is, to be honest, not just mine. It's like, I have picked up all these ideas through life, through experiences, connecting with people, the client experiences, learning based from supervisions, peer group, all these, which we all, it becomes a part of our experience. So it's all like a rich tapestry and my attempt to produce something new. So what I would like to do is emerge, create a model or something, and we'll see like a shared experience, what comes out. Yes, thank you. So, yeah. So I'll come to just to make it easier. And hopefully that should be okay. Yeah. So, just 1 second. So in this slide, it's my aims, what I would like to be doing. So I would like to be showing you my mind map, the integration of various concepts, transactional analysis, cultural studies, literature, neuroscience, and computers. It would be like a whistle-stop tour, so please hold on to your experience.
Divya, you need your camera so we can't see you.
Sorry, is that better?
That's better, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, I hadn't realized. Yeah, thank you for that. So this would be basically like a whistle-stop tour, so please hold on to your experience. These are huge topics, as I just said. So please don't worry. I would be only extracting the key connections or the links. Through these links, combined with my experience, I would be defining my cultural other. And then I will be introducing you to my new model, which I feel is a need of the hour, and my process and reflections woven into it. And above all, the most important, I would be requesting for your valuable feedback and critique. So what do I mean by the cultural hello? This is going to be a developmental perspective because that's what it stands for me. It's like moving to UK as an adult. It felt like being born again. If I integrate concepts of culture with attachment theories, the need for a secure base, Bowlby, 1969, Mary Ainsworth, 1978, Strange Situation, where I explored a bit more further, Pam Levin, Cycles of Development, Dawson and Clark, To Grow Up Again, representations of interactions that have been generalized, Stern, 1985, Erickson, 1995, Psychosocial Developmental Stages and the Relevance of the Other. And all these other attachment theories, the concept of the other in shaping of the self to define the personality of my own ego states and the way I stand today. The cultural other as a connection between two or more lives. For me, smallest exchange with someone might sometimes stir memory that can take me to an experience from the past. And I think the here in the present, is it real or am I imagining? For example, when I did my foundation degree in transaction analysis at Peter Simmons, it required us to submit our weekly personal reflective journals before our tutorial once a term. My course tutor and then head of counseling would mention certain things like, I see you learned this, and that was a part of your awareness, and that you challenge yourself here, and that this was scary, and so on and so forth. For me, on a personal level, it was quite a relational experience. And it felt that here was someone who was interested in me and understood me. It would feel like a connection, like my parents who would listen to me or read my letters, or friends who would read my emails and respond to them. So the cultural other reminds me of the other life lived in literature background in India. I think of my own PhD thesis, which I submitted on the cultural other in the writings of D.H. Lawrence back in India with my professor, Dr. Sudha Rai, at the University of Rajasthan, Jaipur in 2003. My work was on his travel writings. Here, I looked at D.H. Lawrence, who had opened up doorways of connection between cultures of the past and the present, between British and non-British cultures, dismantling the myth of European hegemony and its practice of othering, accepting and invoking rather than life-giving communal forms of connection discovered in these cultures. In a world embroiled in clash of civilizations, he was there writing in the 1920s about interconnectedness. All these conversations reminded me of the moments where I would be sharing my personal achievements and despair. To grow up again in Britain and integrate it with psychotherapy, everything felt, starting from ground zero. To grow up again in Britain and start all over, to keep regenerating, recycling, and stretching. And hopefully the twain shall meet. Just a bit of, adapted from Rudyard's Coupling, 1889, The Ballad of East and the West. So what do we mean by culture? Yeah. Would anybody like to? What comes to your mind?
I think the thing that comes to mind actually is the concept of roots, like the American concept of roots, and what your I guess nationalistic upbringing was.
Yeah.
But I don't want to get confused with the concept of nationalism, if that makes sense. It's really about what the patterns and processes are from the cultures you grew up in. And I'm
Yeah.
aware that it's not just about, I mean, my upbringing was in Africa and Botswana, and I'm aware that
Okay.
I have influences from my Dutch mother, my English father,
Yeah.
my Geordie stepfather, and that they're all different cultures depending on how you look at it.
Yeah,
But they all
wow.
shape how you are as a person.
Yeah. And that's so many, as you said, all of that in you, all that integration of all those cultures. Yeah. So if I just start, like, just a couple of definitions. So how does one define culture? So again, such a huge topic, so many definitions, but I'll just start with the 19th century, Matthew Arnold in the 19th century, in Culture and Anarchy, 1869, he says, the enabling ourselves, whether by reading, observing, or thinking, to come as near as we can to form intelligible law of things, to get a basis for a less confused action and a more complete perfection than we have at present. From the 20th century, Collins, 1984, he defines culture as the total of inherited ideas, beliefs, values, and knowledge which constitute the shared basis of social action. And now in the 21st century, how do we see culture today in the current context? Like, as you just heard, the global culture, so many mixes, so many, on one side, it could be not growing up with a lot of mixing with cultures, but on the other hand, it might be too dynamic. And that's where we are today. So we don't know what about all these identities, where do people belong, who fits in, we all fit in, but it's where do we fit more, where do we fit less, where are we, what is our place in the whole universe, if I may say, where are we? So, the culture can exist at the global level, at national level, regional, city, neighborhood. We talk of so many subcultures, and sometimes, we call of supercultures. If we think of just psychotherapy, how many cultures would be? If bringing back to the topic here, would anybody like to, are we all here TA? Because I don't want to assume. What other modalities here are in the room today? Okay, if in that case, if I may just bring in an exercise, about 5 minutes, if you didn't mind. And Rebecca, if you didn't mind doing the breakout room again for me, please. What is our culture in psychotherapy? What is the culture we work within? And how does it account for the other culture or cultures in psychotherapy? So I don't, I can leave it open, or, if you wanted to take a picture, and then groups of three and 4, and then 5 minutes. What is our culture in psychotherapy, and how does it account for the other cultures in psychotherapy? Welcome back. How was that? So how many cultures did we identify?
Loads.
For me, like, I was just struck by the workshop is that I came here because I was thinking about culture as in the clients that I'm working with are not from the British culture, but it's actually made me question my own cultural identity and
Yeah.
cultures that are going on with femininity, and the fact that I was having a conversation with someone on here about not liking the fact that female titles indicate whether you're married or you're not married, and then there's politics and whether you're Brexit or not. So within the English culture, within my own culture, I started seeing lots of different conflicts. So
Yeah.
the slant's gone completely different to where I was coming when I came to the group.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And that's bring us to, like, what is our culture?
Exactly.
How do we all come together with our own, what would we like our culture to be? Yeah. It stirs in, so many dialogues. And, because of the time and everything, I'll have to rush, but, I'll come to the theory bit and then we'll see where we get on with it. Thank you very much, Sarah, for that. So, as you said, like, there's so many, our own culture and the other culture, and how does it account for it? So, starting with Dr. Eric Berne, transactional analysis. So Dr. Eric Berne, founder of transactional analysis, based this modality of psychotherapy on humanistic principles with the philosophy that people are okay, they can think, and they can decide their own destiny, and these decisions can be changed. His vision of social psychiatry was that of professionals, that professionals should be on an equal level, use simple language to manifest social change in individuals and within groups. Transactional analysis has developed ever since, and the way it stands today, it's a theory of personality and a systematic psychotherapy for personal growth and personal change, theory of communication, a method to analyze systems and organizations, theory of child development. TA can be applied in many fields like education, psychotherapy, organization, and ecological. And then Berne gave us the theory of personality. So Dr. Eric Berne, in his classic book, Handbook to Its Principle, he wrote that ego state is intended to denote states of mind and related patterns as they emerge in nature. His methods were more cognitive and behavioral. His concepts of ego state as a theory of personality, it is defined as consistent patterns of feelings and experience directly related to corresponding consistent pattern of behavior. So 1961, we have this model, parent ego, adult ego, and the child. So parent ego state, when I'm behaving, thinking, feeling in ways I copied from the parents or parent figures, I'm said to be in my parent ego states. When I'm behaving, thinking, and feeling in ways that are direct here and now response, I'm in my adult. And when I'm behaving, thinking, feeling as I did when I was a child, I'm said to be in my child ego state. And then, then we come to Pearl Rego. We all know that Berne's individual work came from his groups. Berne's concept of group culture is based on individual personalities. So when a group of people come together as a group, they share parental values, adult procedures, and child emotions, which Berne named as etiquettes, technicalities, and character. So etiquette is related to the parent part of the group that dictates what one is supposed to do. Technicalities is related to the adult part of the group and related to the here and now experience. Characters in a group which tells what one might like to do. Thus, it requires a standard way of behaving and standard set of transactions. Berne's concept of group culture was in line with anthropological studies, and that's where Pearl Rego gives us the personality of the culture. So this came in 1981. Here she integrated Burns' concept of etiquette, technicalities, and characters as 3 ellipses. And then the personality can be used within the parent ego state of the person, and then we get a better understanding of what's going on. So the study of culture's personality can be used as an effective tool for cultural and social transformation. Thus, etiquette will carry all the prejudices, superstitions, culturally inherited beliefs about life, death, good, evil, ritual, social hierarchies, expectations of men, women, talk of, what we talk about, oh, if you meet a British, talk about weather. If you see a French, just say bonjour, say namaste if you see an Indian, So for Africa, it's like, hands together, Ubuntu. So there's almost, that's a part of the thing which goes on in a sort of some understanding for us to know what's happening in people's mind on a generalized point of view. So technicalities are culturally inherited knowledge, skills, techniques, methods of management, how people might have seen at that time, learning skills to deal with external environment, etc. Technology, machinery, etc. All of that would be a part of the technicalities. And character is more primitive than the etiquette and arises from psychological anxieties. About, again, the cultural scripting of like boys don't cry, don't be a girl, don't stare, don't be late. So all of this comprises a part of the individual's culture parent. Any questions so far?
It's not a question, but it's more of like an observation. I was noticing that there's cultures within individual families as well.
Yeah, of course.
About the messages that were in there, because I'm having a bit of a clash with my partner about something that was acceptable in my family that is not acceptable in his, and he's struggling with that in our relationship.
Yeah.
And it's so deeply entrenched in both of us, the opposite opinion, and it's come from our particular setup within the family. So it was just thinking about it in that way as well.
Yeah, because family is the first culture a child for them to learn, and then 2 families coming together, and that's clash of 2 cultures. Yeah, absolutely. And again, I thought when I'll talk about myself, because about what's in my parent ego, what is my cultural parent, as you said, Sarah, about the family. And it's for me, like, I'm thinking of when Pearl Rego gave the model 81, I was 9 years old. And if I think of the geographical area, for example, Rajasthan, the state covers, the area of 340 to 230 square kilometers. And if you compare that to UK, so in a way, Rajasthan is the biggest state of India, bigger than UK. So all those cultures combined inside. And then, I think of culture of Rajasthan comes with a very rich history, art. It's known as the land of kings, and like 23 states within the state got together, and they all came together, and that's known as the place of the kings. So that's a part of the etiquette for me. And then in terms of technicalities, if I was to think of my grandparents, and they were both before the independent time, before India got independent. And it was a new, they were both very visionary and talking about marriages without dowry, against caste, and the situation of women. And, I saw a prime minister, an Indian prime minister who was a woman. My dad working in the industrial town of copper. India was the largest, within India, Rajasthan was the largest producer of copper. And my mom was quite educated at that time, and she was like the only girl in her college. So things were changing. And then because of the population of India, so overpopulated, there was the norm of 2 children. So this is the technicality. I saw about the environment, and we were talking about the say no to plastic and all of that. So that was all a part of my technicalities. Again, in terms of technology, how fast we were moving, and because of exporting of the copper, it was quite dynamic, quite modern. And this is what, here I was in the free country, seeing all of this, very, very modern things happening. And character, if I was to say about my character, what did I see? There were things which, again, seeing my parents, like, my dad using the machines, and sometimes I'd see him being, a bit frustrated because he was the left-hander, and he'd say, oh, wish things could be more inclusive. They should keep in mind all these, we talk about neurodiversity and all these things, people not, the program set, not with everybody keeping in mind. And then again, the huge sense of responsibility for him, and times he'd feel frustrated, and but then as one or few individuals, how much can they change? And he'd say things like, you can only do your best. You can't change people's frame of reference. My mom at that time, and it's for her, and not just her, people in the town, 2 girls or 2 boys, or a boy and a girl, it was okay. But then you'd go outside in smaller, where people's mindset was, oh, just 2 girls? Oh, so it felt as if it was something missing. And then it's like, you can't change everyone. You can't change culture. In my own, if we talk about the P2, I grew up with a lot of nurture, a lot of permissions. I never heard there was anything, it was normal part of me, like the way there were others, like many of my friends, 2 girls, the way I saw 2 boys, I thought it's absolutely normal. So I grew up culture of okayness, went to a diverse, inclusive school, freedom, safety, okay to ask, okay to challenge, experiment, to learn from mistakes, to reality check, listen to my own voice. In terms, and again, coming now, it's like the same in supervision, therapy, use it as a place to learn, get out of comfort zone, and test something new. I was quite scared, when I spoke to Yukata, and I thought, it's my first time. What if something spills out and it's being recorded? And they said, it's okay. So assurance, and that's how we all learn. As a child, I remember, I think I was in my adopted child, and my dad was like, come sit next to me. And I said, you know what? India is independent, and we are in a free country. And how are you asking me to sit next to you? I can sit wherever I like. And that was like about 4 or 5, so talking about the magical child. And I said, and my dad just laughed at me and said, of course, I'd forgotten that India is a free country. Yes, please go ahead and choose what you like. And that's the same for me. Lots of free child. And then this is, this is where we are. We all in this free world. And then we talk about all these power, the dynamics. So, coming back what we said about how does your culture equip you to the world of psychotherapy? So how does your cultural parent equip you to relate to other cultures in psychotherapy? If we do it that an exercise, like a breakout room, 5 minutes, please, and just reflect on that, and then we'll feed onto the bigger group as one together. So how was that exercise?
It was less than 10 minutes, I would say.
Yeah, probably needed
good.
more time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that for us, I don't know, we had really rich discussion, and our discussion was about cultural transference and how we kind of somehow rank cultures and how sometimes we feel like someone is better or worse. What it means for us when we think about how people adapt to other cultures. And it was just a really amazing and rich conversation. Thank you.
Yeah. And for me, again, coming from Rajasthan, I know it sounds a bit like touristy, but it's such a big state. And if I think about the expanse, the big original history of Rajasthan, it was desert, no people, very few inhabitants, and people going for business or traveling on foot, on a camel, with limited water, it's scarcity, not much vegetation, water, electricity, and they walk miles and miles. And then they'd be looking for a house where there might be a lantern or something, and they could just come and take shelter, just take a rest. And, people would say, that's a saying, they'd say, anybody from outside, like a guest is God, basically. So you welcome them because they've come with a lot of hope to your step. And it's almost that physis. They're looking for that mirage. They're looking for that hope. And they've knocked at your door and you let them in. And, questions like, who are you? Where have you come from? Where do you want to go? Sip of water. Just a bit of a step for them to move on to the next step. And that's how I relate to psychotherapy. We have these clients who come to us, whichever part of their journey, because they're stuck. They don't know their destination. They are in that, in that space where they don't know, and they're looking for that hope. Physis. They all have resources, but for them, there are times when they don't know where to go. And if in that time, without judging, you offer them a space and just say, yes, what you need. It doesn't have to be open-ended or small, it might be just a 5-minute, a few sessions, might be a bit more than that. And it's about human to human connection. That's their space for that time. And then they're ready to go. And again, people, I think that's something which is there. When they leave, they're told just to be grounded. Remember the house which offered you water to move on to the next step. So never forget your roots. The people who came into your life, and you carry that as a talisman. And the people who've come back and, like my own grandfather, like my mom's dad, he went and, very good, well known for teaching. He got a national award at school level. And then he came from a town, a village, no electricity. And then he came back and he lit up the whole place. And it's like, there's electricity, there's water, because grassroots, sanitation, water supply, all of these things. When the state is so big, it's going to the roots and, doing it for the society. And that's what psychotherapy is. I came here and, I was received the same way. People said, oh, you've come from a long way. What could I do for you? And for me, it was like, almost I received the same, what was there in me, like, people understood, felt for me. I went to one of the moms and I didn't know she had to go and pick up her son. And she said, oh, you've just come in because by the time I found her house and, everything. And she said, oh, you know what? Stay here while I collect my son, stay in the house. And that felt like a big trust, somebody who's just come to accept and, entrust them with the whole house, property. And, these are the things which stay with us and, sense of belonging, feeling for the other person. Yeah. And I think for me, Erskine, that's what he says. So come back to the topic and so how does the, and we talk about our cultural parent, what's that? And then Richard Erskine, what he did, he went back to his roots, back to Byrne, and the things which weren't explored, theory of motivation, the contact, the hungers, the therapeutic interventions, all those methods. And he dug into those valuable resources. And then he built on, the contact and relationship. That's something so important. The need for relationship constitutes a primary experience of human behavior, and contact is the means by which the need is met. Contact also refers to the quality of transactions between two people, the awareness of both oneself and the other, a sensitive meeting of the other, and an authentic acknowledgement of oneself. With internal and external contact, experiences are continually integrated. So, that's what Erskine's talking about. Who are you? All those 8 relational needs, the questions, who are you? What are you? Sorry, not what are you? Where have you come from? Where do you want to go? To offer a safe space, strengthen the alliance. And, about acknowledgement, all those inquiry, attunement, involvement. And then he talks about the phenomenological experience. And, he talks about he talks about deeper inquiry. Like, you think of the client who comes to you, not thinking you know about him or her or any, just see the client as if you know nothing. And then you have a lens, almost like, deeper inquiry. And under the magnifiers to go and see what's there, touch it, tiny bit, attuning to the needs of the client. Challenging maybe a tiny bit and see how it feels. And, relational. And that's what, the therapeutic interventions he does, the way it's like it's the space he provides. Not judging, and it's letting the client feel for himself rather than pathologizing. So the first model, with Byrne, it felt more like, there is more the how, this is how you do it, but breaking the contact, the 1.5, where you're talking more about the relational, the need for the client to initiate, the 8 relational needs. And the last, about the need for love. Yeah, yes, Sarah.
It's making me think a bit about family systems as well, because they're in the the parent ego state. You've not just got your own cultural experience, you've got people before and before and before. And because I'm thinking a lot about culture, I'm working with one of my clients at the minute. We were spending a lot of time working on her experience for the don't belong, and it wasn't until we expanded it to be grandparents and their experience, and how she realized they had experienced the apartheid, and she was carrying their experience. And going back to the roots that you were talking about, it's massively opened up the work that we've got, and it's given her so much compassion for herself, because she realizes she's been carrying stuff that it wasn't hers, but is massively linked with her culture. So I was thinking about that as you were talking.
Allowing that space for them to open their stories.
And she didn't know she needed to do that either, so it was really helpful for her.
And sometimes it's just being with the client. The UPR, the humanistic, the respect, unconditional respect, love, and regard. UPR. So coming back to obviously, there's so much in richness in the integrative model, but we can't go into the detail. But if I come to, continuing with what 1996, that's where Pearl Rego, which, she gave us this model of cultural parent and cultural shadow. So initially we got about the cultural parent, and now there's the shadow side. And this was quite important for social psychiatry systems. And, earlier it was about the dominant cultures to understand the marginalized cultures. So the people of dominance, like, if there were few people with ethnicities, or to hear that story and then to be able to provide them the space and to listen and, let them accept, develop that compassion, as you said. So like, 1996, Rego gives us the cultural analysis. Like, we have the structural analysis of the culture, of the personality of any culture. And then we have the cultural scripting. So just as the analysis of individual personality of the 3 ego states of parent, adult, and child helps to make personal and interpersonal changes, so the analysis of etiquette, technicality, and character provides tools for both self-awareness and social change. So cultural shadow, the gut level or somatic response, the part of the child that feels the impact of cultural parent is referred to as the cultural shadow. So if you see, the cultural shadow of the C1 level includes sensory experience of sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch. And the scripting is primarily pre-verbal. And that's where we talk about the transgenerational trauma. Fanita English talks about the hot potato, and there's white and white. He's talking about the cultural scripting. If I just stop so it's the impact of all these injunctions on the individual, and that could be threefold, from family history, the whole, it's so much packed in. It's like, so many generations after the generations, and how all of this can go into the cultural shadow. And that's why it's so hard for sometimes cultures to shift, because one person against so many people, and they are stuck. Almost that happens, the collusion, which we talk about. And it's sometimes that's important, like, you have to do groups, the whole of the community, because that's where the work needs to be done. And then, we talk about Valerie Batts in 1982. She was talking about racism. We've spoken about Fanita English, White and White. There's Ledra talking about the Israeli experience in 1996. So in the 90s, if you think about it, there's a lot of cross-cultural writings, and they're talking about group culture, and they're all making difference in their own worlds. So it's not just psychotherapy. If you talk about position of women, position of men, position of, so many differences, and we're all the awakening, the awareness, and how much we're talking about those in between spaces, and where it needs to, everybody, it's just awareness and times. So people finding voices, all the marginalized people which were overlooked, they're coming forward. And again, D.H. Lawrence, again, coming back to my work, talking about sexuality, he was talking, and again, one man against so many, he was talking about group culture, he was talking about men and men position, he was talking about social class, so many topics. And what happened to him? His books were being banned, came in the eye of the storm, scandalized, everything was, too much for the culture to take. And, all the introduction, so there's cultural parent and the cultural shadow, and how, there's the intrapsychic, there's stuckness, almost that cultural impasse. And then we had a top, this is just, I thought I'll share it so that because once we had a session at Byrne Institute, and I was looking, so if I say this line at the bottom, it's the birth, and I was thinking, what goes underneath? How deep do we have to go? So just so that, if you see there's one person and the other person, and the transferences, that's what we're talking here. And just to bring back, it's like, talk about the self and the other. So, the concept of the self and the other, it's been talked about in architecture, sociology, literary criticism, to construct new self, postmodernism, culture expressions of this age, Alan, he talks about neo-constructivism and how it's being talked about. So let me see if I can, stop the screen. Yeah.
Divya, are we going to give people a quick break soon? Just been asked.
Yeah, I thought I could do it after this slide so that, before I release the model.
Okay.
So it might be a good point. Yeah, no, thanks for that, Bex. So, just about the definition of self and the other. See, so other or mother, as we all know, or any other caregiver, is quite important in the development of the self. So it is important to take the concept outside the psychotherapeutic framework and understand, evaluating how the systems have been evaluated. And the systems, the personality, we talk about men culture, women culture, and all are seen like how they were in the past and how they are present, how the definitions have changed because of times. And that brings to the second definition of the other. Like the Sander Gilman in Difference and Pathology suggests, because there's no real line between self and the other, an imaginary line must be drawn, so that the illusion of an absolute difference between the self and the other is never trouble. This line is the dynamic in it itself, to alter itself as in the real self. So this can be understood in terms of projections, transferences, or counter-transferences, and where we can move from fearing and idealizing. So the representation of other has been done in abstract, the mythical, spiritual, and the materialistic symbols. And there's a lot of literature about colonialism time, then the post-colonialism time, and then like the new vision. That's what it's about, the interconnectedness, like, people from, we talk about tiger mums, alpha males, all of these concepts, extremes, and it's about integrating, coming in the middle. And, I won't go into a lot about the transferences, but just quickly say, so that I come to the point before we release the model, about, there's the classical, integrative, relational, there are so many theories of attachment, theories on transferences. We know about the Hebb's law, neurons that wire together, fire together, Klein, Winnicott, Kahoot, Byrne is talking about, scripts belong in the realm of transference. Clarkson categorized, proactive, reactive, Ray Little, impasse, clarification, repeated and needed relationship. And so I think I probably need a break. Yeah. Yeah, I can see, yeah. So 15 minutes. Just talking about integrative and, all the transferences and the self and the other. And I know I rushed this slide, but, it's just so that we are aware that about all the transferences which go between the therapist, client, all along, because of the differences, the clashes, the projections, and all of that. So if I may bring to this model, which I just spoke about, the cultural shadow and the cultural parent. So I said about the impasse, almost like the cultural impasse, where the cultural parent is stuck with the cultural shadow. And that's where it's difficult for people to, about the communities and how we were talking about an individual against all these people, all this, the radicalism, or, people, they are not a part of the group. And then it's like people, two sides, and then people, more and more people becoming on one side, the other, and that's where the power plays and all of that. How things split and more divisions happen, and then there would be a third group, and that's how it happens. Everything, one culture, subdivisions, more divisions, and then this is what it is, the cultural impasse about one person, and how, because of the culture, people might be stuck. So on one side, culture might be quite, a person might feel very good for belonging to a culture, but on the other side, it might be an imposition of the culture. Culture might be too trapping the people. People might feel confined because of the culture. So now that you've had a break, an exercise again. How does your cultural shadow respond to the other culture? Oh, so how was that?
Fascinating. Really interesting. We were talking in our breakout area about the cultural shadow of Yukata and things like that, and the psychotherapies, and yeah, it was really fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's like, the gut feeling, what goes on, what we're holding inside. And that's something, as you said, so many shadows, such a strong shadow. Yeah. So coming back to the screen, you know, if what would happen? That was one culture, you know, we're talking about just when we come, whether it's within two families or relational work, therapist to therapist, a therapist to the client, you know, what's happened when there is two cultures, two opposites, difference, like binaries. And then we talk about the iceberg model. If there are two icebergs, so what happens relationally? Sorry, I can't see my chat function, so too many windows open. So yeah, anybody like to say anything on?
I'm sorry, Divya, you're asking about the transactions between two cultural parents existing in people?
I'm talking like, you know, two people come together and then with all those topics which we are all holding, there are constant, you know, people, ruptures, conversations not flowing easily. And whose voice get heard and whose doesn't. And, you know, in the, where are we in the whole mix? You know, who belongs, who doesn't belong? Who has more power, who has less power? It's all those, you know, the clashes within all those subdivisions, micro, mini micro, you know, all those, one big culture, and then there are so many divisions, like, you know, yeah.
What you're saying makes me reflect on is sort of quite conflict driven and imagine sort of two things clashing. It also is making me reflect on the on self-moderation. So in terms of interaction between two people, and I, you know, accepted that some people are more culturally sensitive or aware than others, but I think more and more there's a growing level of caution about not wanting to cause offense. You know, I don't want to be upset, so actually I'm going to hold back so much of myself, and not be fully present. So, you know, I wonder if transactionally, those lovely arrows that we draw between the
Absolutely.
Are they even making it? Are they even getting that far? Are we even transacting?
Yeah. And that's, you know, that's our real culture. It's okay. And, you know, we had a weekend at Burn and there was the vision which came, you know, a tutor, John Heath, he put that, and I had a look, and exactly the same question came to my mind. And I thought, this is, we talk about transactions, we talk about UPR, we talk all those values, and that's such a good vision. But is that happen? Does it, how much real is it? On one side, there's homonymy. We talk of autonomy, homonymy, but actually, human to human. And, you know, I think last February, it was, you know, had a weekend at, again, my training institute, and that was on the couples work, you really came back positive, everything. And then coronavirus, everything shut, uncertainty. And that's when things really stirred up for everyone. We were like, we didn't know where we were. And that's, again, schools were like my son, A level, we didn't know what was happening. For me, work was getting more. Again, with my husband, work got more. It's everything. And with me shielding, got more and more trapped. And some of the inquiries which I had, and they were, felt really for them, all these things, it suddenly felt too trapped within the system. Like, we talk about, Haley Marshall talks about the outdoor mind. And then all the inquiries were about the power dynamics. And Mr. George Floyd, that really stirred up things. And it's just was too much. Things were happening within the personal therapy. And I did speak to my therapist, and she'd provide a container, we'd talk about it. And she'd say that it feels that you've got the whole, like a shoulder, you're carrying a mountain on your shoulder. And I said to her, why should it be like that? Why should I be the one? We are all feeling. Went to the course, and again, we were all at the tutor, we talking about the same thing. We were like, again, at my agency supervisor, she said, oh, Divya, I can feel the passion in your voice. You sound like a real Martian. But I don't like to be like that. Why should, we all are in it together as one, it's all of these people linked together to make a difference, because the world of psychotherapy is suddenly being realized, because that's when other key services, but mental health has gone right at the, how much recognition, but that was being recognized at the time of coronavirus. And that's where I felt, there's something we need to do. There is, some gap. And that's why I thought there's something we need to, there's somewhere, like, where it doesn't match what you just said, Paul, about being transactions not even happening at the basic level. Anybody would like to say anything?
I think Divya, I agree with your point that when we focus on others, and kind of further to Paul's point, when we're categorizing people into groups rather than focusing on people as individuals, that's where hesitance comes and all of our script gets evoked. Whereas if we're accepting that we are all just individuals, it's easier to ask questions and be curious, because the base assumption is I can't know what your experience as another human being is. Even if we're in the same house with the same parents, we experience things differently.
Yeah. And then I thought, if you have a look here, what's happening? If you had a look at the picture closely, who is judging whom? I was going through a lot at that time. It was last year. And then I was thinking, there's something new. Then I look, thought, what? Pearl Drago gave us the model in 1996. Where are we now? Culture has changed so much. And we are still with, looking, so the culture is the one who's judging all of us. The culture of, those systems. And that's something which needs to be shifted. And, you know, again, a part of the process, you know, where I'd share it, my supervisor would give me all these books, you know, and, or she'd say, oh, have you read this article? Have you been on the TAJ? Have you seen this? And then she'd given me a book, and that was the Third Culture Kids. And I had a read, and I thought, God, that makes it so much clearer. So, you know, that's got all those in between where people are, you know, it doesn't have to be one and one. It's like, you know, so many cultures already in that. In any person's identity. So if I, you know, maybe, you know, again, exercise, breakout room, if you could maybe take a picture of this slide. Who are these, can you know, within a person, all these shades in relationship to the culture, outer culture outside.
How long are we giving for this breakout, Divya?
10 minutes, Specs.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sorry, could you clarify the question for us, Divya?
So if you have a look at this picture, so you know, there's foreigner, hidden immigrant, mirror, adopted. So people who might look different, you know, if you could have a look on this model, how can you identify who is who? Which category would people belong?
Okay, thank you.
Is everyone back? Yeah. So how was this for you? So the clash of cultures, the not clash of cultures, sorry, the cross-cultural products or the children. And you know, these might be children from so many backgrounds, children of immigrants, multiracial, multilingual, all those. They've already seen bombardment of so many cultures growing around them. You know, they are educational, cross-cultural kids, children of refugees, children of borderlanders, international adoptees, domestic third cultural kids. And when I was reading this book, and I said to my supervisor, I thought, you know what, it's suddenly so clear. It's like, I thought of my own identity as a domestic third cultural kid. And then if I bring this slide about what happens, these are the people who grow up in a very tight system with security, like for example, the children from embassies, you know, or military, or where the parents are working for the organization, within an organization, corporate world. And I thought about all my background as a copper girl belonging to the copper family, where my dad joined as a, you know, mining engineer recruited by the Government of India enterprise. And they'd be transporting, you know, copper to the world at that time. I mean, it still is. And for me to see so many cultures at that time when it was emerging the place. And I know the helicopter landed, the Prime Minister of India to inaugurate that place. People flocked together to have a watch. And we in my industrial town, there were people not just from India, but a small minority of foreigners from UK, Sweden, Finland, Australia, Zambia, and a lot of places. So for me to have seen that structure, and when they grow up in these places, when they become big, suddenly they look for that world, and that world, they can't get it outside that. And then they keep looking for a system which feels like their own, and they leave that place only because, they're looking for something more, something to fill it up. And it's like, they're looking for that structure. And that's the cultural other. So they're looking for that culture which they grew up very ideal and which doesn't stay forever. And that brings to the model. So just coming back, does this make any sense? Bouchon, again, provided by my supervisor, it's there on the expo stall. And these are very book, they talk about, she talks about, but that's the book, it's available in the, and then the other one, about how the people might look the same. They might be, people might think they are the same, but they might not be the same. So for example, for me, I might look, if I go in India, I might look alike or think, but I might not think alike with the same like any of you, there might be people who might be the same color or same, they might look the same way and they might think the same way. Or they might look alike, but might think differently. Like, within India again, I might look, but then I might think differently from, and I might think, I might find people who might think the same way, and they don't have to look this, I'd go for people who think like me, whatever they look like. And then the foreigners they look different and they think different. And that's where we can't tell who's who, what's, it's all those shades because there's such a mix. And that brings the concept of the cultural other, a product of all of that, and finding, who they are in the culture, representing the culture they come from. And that's the model where, if you were to think of relational model, where all the culture, the Drago's model, where it was on the top looking everybody from the bottom, but that goes bottom. And what Erskine said, to look at the client, knowing that they don't know anything about it, not judging them from any culture or your own culture or pathologizing the client, but inquiry, involvement, attunement. So, the cultures, yours, mine, this, theirs, hey, all of those shades, they don't go on the top, they come below us. And this, where the projections, the transferences happen, the transferences, rather than outer, we go inside and we are looking at each other through the eyes of, through the eyes of soul, human to human. We almost the transcultural eyes, we are looking at the other culture to absorb that culture, what that to understand the culture understanding of that client or that person, rather than looking at our culture parent, we feeling scared or offended, or or judging. And it's openness, inquiry. And almost like, I find that psychopathology, like pathology, a pathologist won't look at naked eye, or he'll have microscope. Like that, we need to have this transcultural lens. And from that lens, when we have that, we are not judging the other person. We are able to see that person without those projections, the way he is, or the way he used the word he, but could mean, either with all those shades, all those hues.
It sounds lovely and ideal to be like that, but it takes an awful lot of awareness.
Yeah, and absolutely. And that's where I say, the relational model is we are not ready for it. It is great, it's got real good learning, but we need to come back a step. Like, what Erskine said, he went back to the roots, went back to burn, and we need to do, relational is good, but there is a missing developmental stage where the culture, our cultures, or everything needs to go here, not there. So 1996, that Pearl Drake, that needs to be updated because we are in the 21st century. And, then I did a OK Corral. So it's like, I'm okay. So if I start here, my culture is okay with me and other culture is not okay with me. So for me, if I'd say my culture is okay with me, and then the other culture, like, talking in terms of a child, like female sometimes, or people are born into that culture where, female infanticide, all those again, a person, because he's born this way or that way, not fitting in, and that's not acceptable because it's the society who's judging that person. So my culture is not okay with me, other culture is not okay with me. I'm not okay with my culture, other culture is not okay. But then my culture is okay with me and your culture is okay with me. And the world of psychotherapy, wherever we are in the world, this is the model for us to be able to work. Yeah. Anything else anybody would like to add on to that?
Thank you. I was just thinking in terms of cultures, and in my mind I had a picture of two layers of culture, a macro culture and a micro culture.
Yes.
And I was thinking about the reality of what's been presented as predominantly culture as a negative influencer in a lot of cases, and unhelpful in terms of transactions. And I started to ask the question, are we seeing an increasing fracture of macro cultures, creating lots and lots of micro cultures where people can again rediscover a cultural identity that works for them? And so with a massive amount of micro culture going on, are we moving towards a more we're not there, but a more permissive environment where there are multiple micro cultures that are taking the place of the cultural parent in our ego states?
Yeah. And it's like, accepting, humanistic, culture doesn't define us. It defines us, but not in a way to judge. We all have our culture. And that's the cultural other, And again, coming to, I did say about computers. So, computer, binary, it's like two binaries, 0 and 1. So it doesn't have to be, if a micro or only one culture goes, that's what it's happening. But when two come, they create something new. And, you know, it's like about the fingerprint. Everybody's got their own fingerprint. Everybody is a product of, no two people are the same. They don't have the same fingerprint. And that's why they have their own script. And, you know, this is one, again, I adapted Adrian Lee's diagram where she had used the word self, and I've substituted with that. Yeah. And then coming to there was a slide, if Bex, if you could say, you know, because where a person is not up to speed with where he is in his understanding of his own culture, how or where he is or she is, or, you know, not taking any position from here or there, but anywhere on the spectrum. And then, you know, what happens? The games happens, the cultural impasse. You know, if a person doesn't know computer, what happens? Password fails. And at the time of global interconnectedness, so it's two joining together in a safe place, providing the container, and that's where the real homonymy comes. Yeah, and that's the reference list. And just to add in a few slides because of the outdoor mind, you know, for me, growing up in the farm, nature, animals, that's a picture of my, yeah, just a few slides here and there. But, you know, coming to the binary model, what do you think of that? Because, you know, your feedback.
I think it's too simplistic. I think it's good as a reference, but I think that's where people fall into a trap where they have a binary model idea.
No, yeah, it's two binaries making something non-binary.
Mm.
So that's where, because if we look from binary position, that's where it falls. But if there are two people, well, it could be a binary and a non-binary, two non-binaries, two, you know, whatever shades. It takes two to make, yeah. And that's what I'm saying. It's not a binary model. It's 0 and 1. It's a binary and a non-binary. It's an inclusive model where everybody has got their own fingerprint, their own shade.
I'm seeing it as translating digital into analog.
Yeah.
That's how that's how it makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I think the way I understand it, Divya, is you're talking about a multiplicity of binaries making something that's very complex. You know,
yeah, because
the way that we're all talking and interacting with each other is digital. We are in every picture, every pair of glasses, blue shirts, whatever it might be, is being combined on your screen as a result of noughts and ones, and we're making something very complex.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, so a summation of lots of binaries creates something complex.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah. And humans are complex, you know, all those transactions and, you know, but then with digitalization, you know, all the things which people have been able to do, it's, you know, the mind and the body integrating all of that to make it emerge the way it is, and the richness. And, you know, there's a little clip which explains the coding. And it's like how the codes are set, like, Byrne talks about, the client would present to the therapist in terms of code, and then the, behavioral, historical, all those diagnoses. And then Erskine talks about how using relational aspect to decode and to, to get the psychopathology of the client. And we need this trans-cultural lens where where the judgments are held underneath, not by feeling scared, but attuning, mirroring, offering that space. And how is it? Step by step attunement.
But obviously, I know we haven't got time to play the video, Divya, but I've sent the link in the group to everybody in the chat if you'd like to watch it.
Oh, yes, please. That's great. Yeah, because, I'm aware they said time might close to any time. So, yeah. And it's having that outdoor mind, how the boundary is getting a bit bigger, going more robust. But it is, I agree, such a huge topic. And that's why I think need to address the cultural other as I see it, as a missing stage developmentally, because relationally, that's where things happen. The clashes, the micro, all those divisions. Because how I see is possibly that's where we are. So it's to reflect, transgenerational work. How many centuries behind we might have to go? Evolution, all of that.
Divya, is it possible to receive the slide simply because this particular one, I'm finding it impossible to read the bottom part of the container.
So the bottom part is, what I shared with about Pearl Drago's.
Right,
so that's
okay.
exactly what I've just put it. I'll just bring it over to say.
I know which one you mean, thank you. I know what you're.
So this is the one which is going on the bottom of the ego states,
Thank you.
So rather than the culture, all of that on the head goes at the bottom.
Yeah, I'm with you. Thank you.
Right. No, thanks for asking. Yeah. Any other slide you felt was less clear or unclear? Any doubts? Any questions?
Would you like feedback?
Yes, please. Any feedback?
I was saying in our group, Divya, that my head is absolutely full now. And I almost wish that I'd had a bit of reading to do or something to think about before I actually came here in terms of your presentation particularly, because I don't feel I've contributed very much because I'm still processing what you've suggested. So for me personally, it's been it's really interesting, and I want to go away and look at this in much greater detail. And on a personal level, I just thought your story of yourself and arriving in this country was absolutely charming and really, really positive. And to be honest, I could have listened to you talking about that for the whole presentation, but thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Julie.
Divya, I've really enjoyed the group work and discussions about, thinking about different cultural ideas. The last set of groups that we're put into, I became very curious that Lee and I were in the same group. So we're two white men with grey hair, both need glasses to read, sitting in rooms on office chairs with a piece of art on the background, both wearing blue shirts. So it's brought up lots and lots of things for me to think about. And I particularly like your adaptation of the OK Corral, mainly because it's my favourite piece of theory.
Yeah.
And I really like the, your inference that binary elements of relationship, if there are lots and lots of them, lead to complexity in society and culture. So
yeah.
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the feedback, David. Yes, lots to take it. Yeah, so much to read, and yeah, absolutely.
So Divya, did I hear correctly that this is the first time you've done a workshop?
Yeah.
So I would just like to say well done. You wouldn't, if you hadn't have said anything, you wouldn't have known. And, you know, you've put together something that has kept us all really interested and raised lots of rich, you know, conversation. So yeah, just really well done. It's been really good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to say that I've really enjoyed this workshop. It's thrown up lots of questions for me and made me want to really investigate a lot more about Pearl Drago. I have come across her before, but you've shown much, sort of a lot more complex diagrams. And yeah, I'm thank you. Wonderful workshop.
Thank you, Gillian. Thank you for the feedback. I did say it to the, the Yukata about the 12th time. I know we're past the time and you'll have to go to the other workshops. So I'm happy to draw it to a close, but really appreciated all the input, feedback. Thank you very much.
And
Thank you.
Look,
Thank you.
Thank you, Divya. That was
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Great workshop.
Thank you.
Divya, look at what's in the chat as well.
Okay, thank you.
There for you. Okay, take care.
Thanks. Thanks, Sue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you very much, Divya. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Actually, can I ask, are the slides available to view again on Carter? Will they be putting up the slides so that we can view them?
I'll have to ask, I'm not sure, but they should. But yeah, I'm not sure is the answer.
Okay, no problem. But thank you ever so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.